Okay, so I just wanted to make a video on my typical process for putting together an Arma mission, like a multiplayer mission, and putting that on the server and just how to do the entire thing from start to finish. So feel free to skip ahead if there's something that you already know how to do. There's hopefully something in this that you find useful. And I'm going to break it up into several sections and also into the first and sort of second half. The first half will be showing how to export a mod list, how to make a really basic mission in Eden Editor, how to test the mission, how to install and update mods on the server, how to set up your mission on the server, and then finally how to run that mission on the server. And in the second half of the video, I'll basically be going over just kind of what I consider a better or faster way to do things. So I'll show you how to set up the same mission in a much faster way, how to use templates, presets, and compositions to just kind of streamline everything. So let's get started. So where I would like to start with all this is by simply exporting a Arma mod list. Importing and exporting mod list is probably something most people have done before if they've ever played a modded version of Arma. But I'll just touch on it real quick because a Modlist HTML file is something that we will definitely need for the server. So I'm going to just open up my launcher, go to my mods tab. I've already got a mod list here that I'll be using, and the first 21 mods in this list are mods that I use in just about um, every mission now. I will also include this mod list in the description of this video, so you can have your own copy if you'd like. And I've included this last one here as just kind of a new mod, basically so that we can see what it's like when we put a brand new mod that's not on the server on there, make sure it's up to date on all that. So we're going to go up to more, export list of mods to a file. And you can name it really pretty much whatever you like, but I'm just trying to keep everything the same. I'll also name it example mod list v1, save it, that'll go into my downloads folder. That's all there is to that, so now let's go ahead and launch Arma with this mod list. Alright, so Arma's loaded up. We're going to go ahead and hop into the editor. I'm just going to use Stratus. Doesn't really matter which map you use, at least for tutorial purposes. Alright, so we're in a clean slate mission here. Nothing's really been done yet. But I'll just go ahead and start by first making a save of it. And I'm going to make this a multiplayer mission, so I'm going to save it in the MP missions folder. And I will just give it a simple name, example mission 1. There we go. Alright, so what that should have done is made a mission folder for this example mission 1 and put it in your MP missions folder where everything will go. Later on we'll be exporting this into a PBO, which is also done through editor. So now we're going to go ahead and set up all of our attributes that we're going to need. Okay, so before we set up any of the actual attributes, I'd like to preface all this by saying that there's only a small handful of things that I will usually change. Some of those are what I would consider absolutely required to change, or at least to set correctly, and some of them I consider more just kind of a nice to have kind of thing, and I'll point out what's what when we get to them. First, we're going to go up to the general attributes up here. This is a nice to have kind of thing, but I like to make sure it has a title, so I'll just give it a mission title, example mission title. Also note that if you hover over most of these things, they usually do a pretty good job at telling you what they are and what they're for. Not all of them have that, but most of them do. Now, if you're using the 3D Enhanced mod, which I use for most of my mission making, you will have this option here, the Editable Objects Zeus. This will tell you what it is about, but I am going to check that because I find it to be pretty useful. also optional. And this is also optional here, this intro text. There we go. And I will just say it's example mission by me. I don't usually put a time on it. I like for it to have a delay. So all this is here is just this little text window that pops up in the bottom right of the player's screen when they load in. And this time delay is how long it takes before that shows up. This is completely optional, of course. I just like to have it in there. Click OK. And our general attributes are set as I would normally have them. Okay, so now we will hit on all of our multiplayer attributes, which are in the same attribute tab up there. So I will usually give it a summary just so I can have some way to kind of see what the mission is about. For this one though, I'll just call it example mission summary. Lots of details, just to kind of give you an idea of what it is. Completely optional, of course. Enable AI. I would consider this, for the way that we run most missions, to be required. If you don't uncheck this, it's not the end of the world. You can still disable AI, but what this essentially does with this checked, the AI will, or rather, all of your playable slots that players can load into, those will be occupied by AI unless you tell them not to. It's very rare that we play with AI in our groups, so I usually just uncheck that, so that's not even something that comes up. Okay, moving on. Respawn. So by default, respawns are disabled. I'm not entirely sure why, but most of my missions, actually I can't really think of any that I've ever done where I don't want players to have the ability to respawn. I may make some small changes between them, and of course there's a lot of different ways to handle respawns, but I'll show you what I typically do. So of course I don't want it disabled. I like to use the respawn on custom position. I like players to see where they're going to respawn, and if there's more than one, they get to choose where they go. Also, in this little rule set for the custom position, I want to make sure that they can select the respawn position. And I don't really see a need to have a respawn counter, so I usually just uncheck that. That's also pretty optional. And I like to make sure there is some amount of delay for the respawn. I think having it be instantaneous just seems, I don't know, maybe it's just from playing lots of other games before where you have a respawn timer, but I like to have, at least a minimum amount. 5 seconds is kind of as low as I go. Sometimes I'll make it longer, but it's fine like that. And as far as things go in multiplayer attributes, we've already set everything that I would normally set. There's a lot of other stuff that you might want to take a look at in here. One thing to point out quickly, the revive settings here, these are, if you are using ACE, these will be overwritten by ACE. If you're not using ACE, these will be used. So right now I have ACE loaded, so none of these, I can change these to whatever I want and nothing will actually matter. But do keep in mind that you still need to address the respawn settings for your ACE options, which we will get into later. So we are done with our multiplayer attributes, so click OK. And now is probably a good time to hit that save button. So add-on options are essentially the settings that you can change for mods, like for specific mods. Not all mods have settings that you can tweak, at least not directly in the add-on options settings. But there are quite a few, particularly if you're using something like ACE, where you have lots and lots of things that you can customize. So add-on options are up here in settings, add-on options, and if I open up this drop-down menu, you can see the plethora of things that we can tweak. Now, of course, for the sake of this video, I'm not going to go in and take each one by one and actually set all these. I will typically load a preset for it, which can be done down here, which I will hit on a little bit later. But for now, I just want to use one of them just to kind of give you a quick preview. Let's say we wanted to take a look at ACE Logistics. Okay, so there's actually quite a few in ACE Logistics. I'm not going to go into any of the details of each individual setting, and like before, tooltips will appear if you hover over most of these, which do a pretty good job at explaining what they are actually going to do. But the important bit here that I want to point out is just a little bit of the functionality of some of the interface. Anytime you change something, either with a slider or checking and unchecking, you'll see that this turns yellow because something has been changed, and then you'll see that these have become buttons that you can press to reset it to whatever the default value was. So if I wanted to be back to whatever the default was for that one, click that. Now it's back at its default. It's also pretty useful if you're kind of going back and forth tweaking the same settings. If you hover over this little button here, it'll tell you what the original default value was, which can be pretty useful if you're trying to dial in something and you're trying to remember, well, what did it used to be, that kind of thing. Also to note is the overwrite here, overwrite clients. So what this essentially will do right now with this load time coefficient, with the way it's set up, it'll be 6.4. I'm not sure what that coefficient actually means, but I think it essentially how long it takes to load something. But with this little box right here checked, overwrite the client, whenever you load into a multiplayer session, you should have a client option up here that you're able to access. Right now it's grayed out because I'm not in a multiplayer session, I'm just in the editor making this mission. But a client can come in there, click on that, and open up this same window for the client side of things. And if there's anything that does not have a setting overwritten with this little checkbox for the client, then they can go in and change that themselves. So what's important to keep in mind is what you want to give your players freedom to change in their settings, because there are definitely things that you want to restrict them from changing, and there are things that you want to give them, ideally would want to give them the freedom to change, because some things are preferences, and some things are simply just everybody needs to be on a level playing field kind of thing. Simple example would be something like where is it? Asymmetrical. Asymmetrical is probably the most extensive list of settings, but most of the settings in here you would want everybody to be using the same ones. So overriding the client's ability to change those would almost be a must, at least in my book, because it would be kind of unfair and unusual if you, for example, left the ability to change whether or not people can limp or not. And if one player decides that he wants to turn off limping and everybody else has it turned on, then that would be kind of an unfair kind of thing. But at the same time, there are things that may be preference based, like maybe somebody really wants to kind of customize the colors of what their damage looks like for asymmetrical. There's all sorts of things that you'll see that are like obviously preferences, and so it's good to keep in mind when you're setting these to look out for what is being overwritten, because you don't want to upset a bunch of people by forcing them to use the settings that you think they should, if it's simply something that kind of comes down to like just a preference. So keep that in mind when you're dealing with these. Now, of course, I'm not going to go through every single one of these because that would be a long time. But I would definitely get familiar with them. And for now, I'm just going to load a preset, which I will come back to later on how to do that. It should be pretty straightforward, but we'll come back to that. So now we can move on to. So I'm here in the map screen now. I'm just going to pick kind of an arbitrary place. I don't know. We'll go say they're going to start at this military range. And let's say I want my players to start here. So there's just a couple of modules and logic entities that I want to set up here just for a really basic mission. The first of those being a headless client. So a headless client is pretty useful. If your server has the capability to use one, I would definitely recommend it. It makes the performance for the clients much better in most cases, and our server can use it. So it's pretty simple to set up. We're going to go up to the systems, and it'll be under logic entities. Now most of the time I'll just actually type out what I'm looking for, because I usually know what I'm looking for and I find it easier than going through a bunch of menus. So head will get me my headless client, and I can just drop this in anywhere. And when I say anywhere, I mean you can literally put this anywhere you like. Where this goes does not matter. It just needs to be in there. And there's literally only one thing that you need to do with it. You need to double click on it and go into its attributes. And I don't really need it to be a player, but I do need it to be a playable unit. And that is it. Headless Client is set up. So another function that would be pretty much I would consider a requirement is to have a respawn position for your players to respawn at. And that one is also pretty easy. It's actually going to be up in modules, and I will just type in res to find it. Respawn position, there it is. Now this one does matter where you put it. As you might imagine, wherever this gets placed and set up, that is where your players will show up when they respawn. So let's just say we want them to spawn right here next to our little building. Now this does require a little bit of setup. It's very simple though, so if I just double click on it, I can start out here with the name. I don't remember what this place is called, but we can just call it the base. And that will be the actual name that shows up as the spawn point on the map when they're looking at all the different spawns that they have. It's also an infantry spawn, which is good, so we don't need to change that. The other ones are vehicle related. We do need to set which side is able to use it. Now, the leading side is more for like a PvP type of thing, but let's just make it a blue 4-1, and we'll make sure that all of our players are blue 4. And this needs to be shown to everyone, which is good. You can change it to that side or whatever. Really, any of those will work fine. And notification, I typically disable that. I don't really find it. I don't really like being able to see when the player respawns. I think I don't know, it looks kind of weird to me, so I just usually disable that, but that's totally optional. And we just click OK, and that's ready to go. So that will be pretty much all we need to do other than setting up the multiplayer attributes with the custom respawn position settings. Those two combined will give us place for players to respawn, so that's taken care of. Okay, so another module that I have in virtually all of the missions that I set up is Zeus. Most of my missions rely pretty heavily on Zeus interaction, so it's something that I will definitely want to have. Now there are quite a few ways to set up Zeus so that players are able to use a Zeus module. So I will show you the way that I prefer, but keep in mind there are quite a few ways to do this. But let's go ahead and start by grabbing, it's actually called a Game Master module under Zeus, of course, and I will grab this one here, drop that in. This is like the Headless Client. This does not actually matter doesn't matter where you put it. Now there are a couple of things to set up with it as well. So if I double click on it, really the only thing that we need to take care of here is who the owner of the Zeus module is. Now, like I said just a second ago, there are different ways to sort of give ownership and kind of connect the Zeus module with a player. The way that I prefer most of the time is to use variables to kind of connect a specific player role with a Zeus module. And that way, when someone selects that Zeus role, they always have Zeus. So the easiest way to do that, in my opinion, is to say that whatever player has the variable Zeus _1, you could just say Zeus, but I typically will put more than one game master in, just for kind of backups or code Zeusing. But Zeus _1, okay. And we haven't saved in a while, so let's go ahead and save. So all we need to do is make sure that when we have start putting in players, that there is a player that has that same variable name so that they can connect to that Game Master module. So let's go ahead and start putting in players now. So I'm not going to build out a full roster of players, but I will go ahead and just put 1 or 2 in there just to kind of show you how it works. And remember, we set this up as a blue 4 spawn, so I'm going to have blue 4 players, and I'm just going to grab a standard NATO rifleman, drop him in here, and he's mostly good to go. He would be just fine. The only thing he's missing is that he doesn't have the Zeus _1 variable name, so he wouldn't be able to connect with this module. And that's pretty easy to do. So if we double click on him, go in there, give him the variable name Zeus _1. Now when somebody loads into that slot, they will be connected to Zeus. Now I also like to do, this is optional, but I like to give them a role description that makes a little more sense than just rifleman. So I could say rifleman still, that's fine. But especially if it's a slot that has Zeus capability, I want players to know that. So simple way to do that is I could just say player one and in parentheses just put Zeus. That way people know that it has Zeus. Um, this is just the name of the role that shows up in the role selection screen. So I can just click OK, and that player's done. So and they're already in their own group, Alpha 1-1. So as far as everything goes, we're pretty much done here in terms of setting up things to make a really basic mission. Now keep in mind there is all kinds of things that we could change on here and kind of go into more detail, but it's outside of the scope of this video. But if you want to see more about some of this stuff, then let me know. So like I said, I wanted to go ahead and just drop in another one, and this will be good to kind of see the difference between these two. So you can see here that this one is in red and this one is in white, these two, and also that one doesn't have a little red ring around it and this one does. And if you remember, if I double click on this guy, he's a player and he's playable. One thing to point out, Arma wants you to always have at least one of your players, or at least one of your playable characters be a player. This is really just so that it's kind of its own way of enforcing that there is some way that somebody will be playing this, because if you just put in a bunch of units and none of them are actually playable, then it'll be a mission that runs by itself that no one is experiencing. So it'll automatically make a unit that you drop in a player, and once you've got one player in the mission, that's the only one that you can have. This isn't particularly important. The main takeaway is that you need to make sure that characters that you want to be playable have this little playable thing checked. And if you make something a player, it automatically is playable, as you can see there. And to make this guy also playable, it's as simple as clicking playable. So I can also say this is player 2, and he doesn't have a Zeus module, so I won't say he does. So click OK. There we go. Okay, so making sure that your mission works is pretty simple, especially through Eden Editor. There's not much to really do, and you do it all from Eden, so that's great. One thing that we haven't done yet, though, is we haven't actually exported this to multiplayer. Which what that all that does, all you need to know is that everything that is in the mission folder, which we will look at a little bit later, will be packaged up nicely into a little PBO file, and that will be what the game reads to actually run your mission. This will also be what the server reads and what will be put on the server to run your mission as well. So it's really easy to do. We just go up to scenario, go to export, exporter to multiplayer, and this says it's been exported to there. And now when we go up to play in multiplayer, we can click OK. Go over to our roles. There's our Zeus one. Let's grab that one. Okay. Click continue. And we get sent to our respawn screen. Respawn. Alright, so spawning in works good. Looks good to me. So really there's kind of two main things I want to test. Is I want to make sure that if I actually die and respawn, will that work? Yes, it does. Works like we expect. And let's make sure Zeus works. So I press the Y key. There we go. I'm in Zeus. Okay. So as far as testing things goes, with the extent of the stuff that we have in here, that's it. We're done. So what we're going to switch over to now is actually putting the mods and the entire mod list that we want on the server, setting up that server profile to run our mission, and then actually running it on the server, so make sure it works on there as well. So just for the sake of clarity, what I'm going to do is actually go through the full process Gonna exit out of the Eden editor fully. I will leave my mission. I will close Arma. Okay, so now I'm going to open up TeamViewer. Connect to the server. So where I would start with this is actually completely either signing out of Steam on my own computer, or what I typically do is I just come down here and I exit out of Steam. Now keep in mind this is Steam in my own machine. So we're back here in my own machine. I'm exiting Steam. So that way I'm just, when I sign into Steam on the server, I'm not still signed in somewhere else. So I will hop into the server. I will open up Steam. And I will sign in to Steam, my own Steam, on the server now. Oh, whoops, that should be a 5. And what we should see happen is what Steam would normally do if there's a something needs to be installed or updated. So if I go over here to downloads, what I should see is, yep, there's a 148.8 megabyte mod that is not currently installed on this machine that I am subscribed to. So it's going to take the time to do that. Now, if you have a lot of other mods that aren't on here, or have a lot of really big ones, or just one really big one, this would definitely take a lot longer. But that's really all it needed for that one. I can just clear all to make that look nice and pretty. As far as Steam goes, we are done with it now. So now we can go to faster to start setting up things. So I will just minimize Steam. I'm going to go up to faster. Run that. Now this may already be running when you hop onto the server. It usually is already running. Every now and then I'll close it just so that it can be restarted. So what we need here is to go to our Steam Mods tab. Now this is all of the mods that are currently on the server, and you can take a look here that all of them, I believe, are up to date right now. So we need to bring in that Modlist file that we made earlier, the .html file, put it on the server, and then import it. So let's go ahead and do that now. So I'm going to go into File Explorer on my own computer. I'm going to go find my Modlist, and I'm just going to copy it. Close that. And I've already got a folder here where I keep Modlists on the server, the BW Arma one. If I go into Modlists, I'll paste it there. There we go. So now when I'm in faster again and I want to click on this import from Arma 3 launcher file, click on that, I can go find where my mod list is that I want to import, which is already right there. We can click open. And it will import the mod into faster. Now this hasn't installed it, it hasn't really done anything other than just kind of add it to the list. So we still need to do that. But if you go to click on status, it's kind of the easiest way to see it. You can see not installed. There's the mod that needs to be done. So what I'll do now though, instead of going directly to installing that, I will actually go ahead and check for updates for all of the lists. And this can actually take a fair amount of time. So I'll just go ahead and click it now, check for updates. It's going to check for all of them. So I will come back when that is done. Okay, so the check for updates thing has completed. So if we go to status now, we can see that the one that we need an update for is the only one that's been shown, which is good. That means everything else is up to date, so all we need to do is update that one. Regardless if that's just the only one or not, I'll still go ahead and click on the update all button here. And this will send us into the updater window, and you just have to sit there and let it do its thing. It usually doesn't take very long. There we go. So once you get that Steam CMD exited, that's kind of your go ahead for moving on to the next step. So all of our mods are up to date. If I come back in here, I've already forgotten the name of it. There it is, that one. You can see that it's now up to date. So hopefully all of our mods are installed and updated correctly, and all that's left now is to bring in our mission file into the server, set up our profile to use it, and run it. So let's go and get started on that. So where I would typically start with getting all this set up correctly is with our server profile. So over here you can see a list of server profiles. What these essentially are is these are just, if I click on one, we can look at the Mass Effect one that we've run recently. You can see in here essentially what it was running, which mission it was running, all the things that are set up for it for difficulty settings, AI skill, that kind of thing. Any related things like the password, Headless Clients, that's all in here. Also, the most important part probably is which mods are going to be run for that profile. So essentially you want to have all the mods you need for that mission in your profile set up so that when you run it and run that mission, everything is using the right stuff. Now, instead of starting a server profile from scratch, which can be kind of easy to forget to set something correctly, what I'll typically do is I will either pick one that's already been used before and just kind of repurpose it, especially if it's a mission that we're not going to be coming back to. Or you can right click on one and you can click on clone and it'll make an exact copy of it. And the only thing you really have to do is make sure that the mods are correct and the mission that's running is correct. So we'll do that now. You can see I've already got an example mission profile here because I was messing with this earlier. So I click on clone. You can do this for any of the mission profiles from a mission that, if you're trying to kind of replicate how everything was set up, you can clone one of those. Most of these are going to be set up identically at this point. There may be a very tiny amount of differences. Of course, the different mods that they're using will be different. But as far as things like these settings here go, they're probably going to all be the same. So you could probably pick most of them and be fine. I tend to just grab whatever was the most recently used. But for now, we've got example mission profile. I can start over here in the profile tab up at the top. And, well, example mission is kind of what I wanted to call it, but we'll just call it an example profile. This is just a good way to kind of distinguish what's what. And you've got your little save button down here to save your changes as you go. Okay, so let's tackle the issue of setting up mods. Now, I'm going to show you the way that I do it, and I'm 99% sure there's probably a better way to do this, and I would love it if somebody could tell me what that way is, because the way I do it's pretty tedious. But nevertheless, I will show you how I like to handle it. So I'll just start by literally going through here and unchecking all of the mods. You can see as I uncheck things, the number of server-side mods, client-side mods, and headless client mods starts going down. I'll spare you the time of me going through this, so I'll go ahead and speed this up. Okay, so that's all of them. I've got 0 mods, 0 mods, and 0 mods down here, so I know this is completely clear. I'm going to go and click Save so I can save all my work because it's quite annoying. The reason I do that is because when I load in up here, load from file, the mod list I want, I just like to make sure that I'm only getting the stuff that I need and I'm not, duplicating anything or accidentally missing one. It's just as easier for me to kind of keep track of everything. So now we need to actually load in the mod file or the mod list that we used earlier. So if I go to load from file, I can find our mod list again, click open, and this should populate the 22 mods only in this little client column here. So I still want to go through and actually make sure that these are all checked on both the server and headless for each of the mods that we're using. And again, I'll go ahead and speed up through this to save you some time. Okay, there we go. So we've got 22 mods on all 3 columns, which means everything is matching nicely, I hope. Click save, of course. So now if we've done all of our work that we need to do, our mods for this particular profile are set up correctly. So what we need to do now is to make sure that this server profile, when we run it, runs the mission that we want. So if we head over to the missions tab, if we look through here, we're not going to see the mission file that we want because we haven't put it on the server yet. So let's go ahead and do that now. If I open up the File Explorer on my own machine and go to the capital MP missions folder, this will be the one that has your .pbo files in it. Like I mentioned earlier, if I go into that other MP missions folder, this is where your mission folder is. This is the one that we were working on. And all that's in here is a .sqm right now. There could be other things in here if you add them. But what happens is it takes everything in this folder. When you click that export to multiplayer, it packages it up into a PBO and drops it in here. And this is what we need to put on the server, so I'm going to copy that. And I like to put this both on the MP missions, or sorry, not MP missions, the BW Arma mission files folder. This is not actually read by anything. This is literally just a place to back up missions, just in case you need a backup. And then I also want to put it on the MP missions for the server. This is its folder that it reads mission files for. So I will paste that in here as well. And once that is in here, if I close that, I can refresh this, and there we go. Our example mission 1 Stratus is now in here. So we've got a little option down here selected, the auto select mission. So what this does is when this is selected, it looks in here for anything that's checked and it'll automatically run that, which right now we shouldn't have anything checked. We don't. Okay, good. So let's just go and check the one that we do want to automatically run, and we can save that. Okay, so now we've reached the point we've been working towards, which is actually launching the mission on the server. But before we do that, I'm going to go ahead and come down here, and I can go and sign out of, or log out of my Steam account there, because this will actually use your whatever signed in Steam is to run Arma, and I want to be able to sign in or kind of connect to the multiplayer server on my own machine. So I can also close that if I want to. But let's go ahead and click on the launch server button. Now this will launch two things. This will launch the Arma server, and this will also launch the Headless Client. So I will come back when those are both fully launched. Okay, the Headless Client and the server, Arma server, have fully launched. They will both show up in a little window up here on the left. One is overlapping the other, so I actually will usually drag this one down so I can see both. Just a quick glance on here though, we can see the Headless Client is connecting and connected, which is good. We can also take a look here. The mission, example mission title, which is the title that we gave it earlier, was read from bank. That's good to see. And we can also see that the Headless Client is connected down here as well. So everything looks good. So now let's head into my own instance of Arma, and we will go into our server browser. There is the server. We will join it, and okay. Now if you actually, once I click this little roll here, if you go back and you take a look at what's going on in here, you can see that I've used the modified data file connected. One thing I like to see is that, should show up here in a second. There we go. Reading mission, roles assigned, reading mission. Mission read. That mission read is one of the most gratifying things to see. Once you see that, you've kind of overcome most of the obstacles that you would encounter. If we come in here, we click continue, should be able to respawn. So now we are connected to the server, everything looks good, and I'll go ahead and test the same things I would test in the Eden editor. Respawn looks fine, looks good, and press Y and I get my Zeus. So that's great. So the other two things that you might consider checking are things like do your radios work if you're using like a radio mod? Does your medical settings work? Do your medical settings work the way that you expect them to? There's a lot of things you might want to test before you really start to kind of build out the rest of the mission. Because I always recommend that you get this first test out of the way to make sure that your mods work on the server, that your mission, like the map that you're using, all works on the server. And then all you need to do is build out the rest of your mission and then just plop in your new mission file and you should be good to go. Alright, so that pretty much covers everything. I will now go into the second part of this video, which kind of shows how I do a quicker way of doing all this. There's not really a quicker way to do the server side of things, but there is a quicker way to do mission setup. So I will head over back into the Eden editor and take a look at doing some of that now. Okay, so I forgot to point out, whenever you're done hosting the mission, I'm back here in the server window. When you're done hosting, you want to make sure that you actually close both of those instances, and now nothing's running. You shouldn't actually see anything on the server browser anymore. Just good to make sure that all that's completely exited out of. You can leave faster up if you like. That should be fine. I usually just have it minimized, and yeah, you're good to go. Okay, so we are back on Stratus. This is a brand new mission. It's not been saved yet. So what I want to do is show first how I would like kind of speed run the whole initial mission setup process by using presets and compositions, things like that. And then I will actually show you how you can set up your own presets and templates and things. So first, just like before, I will save it. And we'll call this the second one, so number 2. I will go into my 3-did enhance tool where the scenario attributes manager lives and pop in a template. This takes care of my attribute settings. What it doesn't really do is change the names of things, so I may want to go in there and give it a real title that I want to use. So it went ahead and set up this little timer and things like that down here, but maybe I want to go and change the line there. And just like in the general attributes, multiplayer attributes, those are also set up. Maybe I want to go in here and customize that. Respawn should be set up the way you like if that's how you save the template, and everything else should be good to go. The next thing I would do is go into my settings, Addon Options, and I would just load a preset to put in all my settings that I like. Then I would go in and drop in a composition with all the logic entities and modules that I want to use. Then I can go ahead and put my respawn wherever I like. Let's say I want it to be right on that helipad. And if I want to name it something, you can do that as well. Make sure the SI matches what you want to be using. And then lastly, I just need a guy to be my player. I'm going to give him that Zeus underscore 1. Give him a name if I want to kind of distinguish him from everything else. Click OK. And that Zeus module is already set up in one of these. I've got several of them that I like to use, but one of them is that Zeus underscore 1. Then I can click Save, Export, and my mission is done. So that's how I like to set everything up when I first make a mission. This kind of just gets all the annoying stuff out of the way. Now keep in mind though, this does mean that you need to set up a lot of this stuff prior to using it. These are used, all this speediness is accomplished with templates, presets, and compositions. So I will go now into each one of those, how to set them up. Some are easier than others, and how you would use them. So we'll start first with an attribute template. Now, again, this is only usable, a tool that's only usable with the 3DEN enhanced mod, which is why I find it so useful. There's a lot of things that it does, but this is one of the most useful things that it can do. But if I come up to Tools, and I go to Utilities, Scenario Attributes Manager, basically once you have the attributes set the way that you like, you can go to create a template from that scenario. Name it whatever you like. If you want to give it a description, you can. Click OK. So now the cool part is that anytime you open a new mission folder or a mission file, you can simply come in here, click on that, and apply that template. So that will set all of your attributes to whatever they were in that mission that you created the template from. It's still, like I said, you have to, make the title whatever you want it to be, because it'll be the title of that mission that you made the template in. But that's kind of an easy thing to change. The real thing I'm after is things like, editable object is already selected, the delay is already set correctly, the style that I like is set, multiplayer respawn is set up. All that stuff is already taken care of, and I don't have to worry about it, and make sure I don't forget anything. So the next thing I'll show you how to set up is the Addon Options preset. The Addon Options preset is pretty simple and fairly self-explanatory. And this is, of all of the three things, is the one that will probably save you the most time, because as you can tell, going through this entire list and making sure that this is customized the way that you like can be really time consuming. You don't want to be doing this every single time you start a new mission, especially for something like Ace Medical settings, where most of those are something you want to tweak. But it's very, very simple. Once you got everything set the way you like, you simply go to Save, and you can come in here, type out whatever name of that preset you want, and you can see I've got quite a few now, and click OK. So then when you go into a new mission, you click Load, you come in here, grab the preset you want, click OK, and your settings are set the way you want, and you can move on. So anybody that's talked to me before about mission making will know that I'm a big fan of compositions. I love using them because I find all kind of uses for them. The idea behind compositions is really it works for anything that you're going to be placing down in the world, and ideally something that you would be placing down more than once. And as much as we like to make all of our missions unique and interesting, there is still quite a bit of repetition and doing the same thing over and over. So I'm going to go ahead and just delete all of this that I've placed down. And what I did, you saw there earlier, is I went into the Compositions tab, I went into Custom, and you can see here all of the compositions that I have. I used to have a lot more, I just recently cleaned this out. But I have one called Basic Logic V4, that when I drop it in is my headless client, my respawn position, and all the game masters that I want to be in each mission. So we'll go real quickly on how to make one of those. So I go to headless client. I'm not going to actually go into each module that I drop down and set it up. I'm just going to show what it's like to make a composition. So I will make a respawn position as well. And I will drop in some game masters. Whoops. Okay, so once I've got everything that I want to kind of group together, I simply drag a window over it, right click on one of them, and go to Save Custom Composition. And you can give it a title, which you see here. These are the titles. An author, I guess, if you want to use that. And then if you want to kind of organize things by what they are, you can also do that as well. Mine are under utilities for things like this. So then once you set all this like you like, you can, let's go ahead and do that in utilities, click OK. And another neat thing about it is, of course you're going to see it show up here, so you can, drop that in as many times as you like. this also works for really anything that you're going to put down. This works for objects, this works for units, vehicles, of course modules, or all sorts of things, which could be really, really useful. Um, it's also really good for anything that's going to have like a very kind of niche script or something. Um, if you want it to, like for example, this arsenal one, I like to use this one a lot. Rather than going in and finding this object every time and finding these little lights, I went ahead and made a composition of this. It is a Ace Arsenal container with some lights in case it's like a dark mission. Um, and it's already got the script that I use to make it an Ace Arsenal. So with just one click, I've got an Ace Arsenal ready to go for my players wherever their base is or wherever you need them to use it. So again, big fan of compositions. I use them all the time. And just another thing to kind of touch on real quick, if I come in here and put in my example one that I made earlier and change it to like Op4 or something, if I select this custom composition, it works like really any other thing that you would save. If I want to like make, update that same one, if I click on it down here in the list, click OK, it'll say, hey, do you want to override it? Yes, I do. Now anytime I put this down, it is a Op4 specific composition for at least with the respawn there. Alright, so the last thing I wanted to hit on is using scripts inside of the mission folder to do some useful stuff. Most of the scripts I use are pretty minor, and don't be alarmed, I'm not going to be typing out code or anything. I'm literally just going to be copying a file into the mission folder, and that's all I'm doing. So we will move over to that now. So the last thing I wanted to touch on was using scripts inside of your mission folder, so that when you export to multiplayer, those get included in the PBO. So I'll just simply touch on two that I use in nearly every mission that I make. If I go to my MP missions, the lowercase one MP missions folder, I've actually got a folder in here where I keep mission scripts, the Arma 3 mission scripts. You can have a folder inside of this MP missions folder, and it's fine. So let me go in there. I will grab this one and this one, copy them, go into my mission folder that I'm working on, paste it. So I will include a copy of both of these in the description of this video. And I'll just briefly touch on what each of these are. The first one being the respawn on start equals 0. So in a nutshell, what happens, the way we had set up the mission before, where we just go straight to this respawn position, we're actually not going immediately to that. What happens is you spawn in as the character that you pick, you die, and then you go to the respawn selection process and you select the respawn that you go to and you spawn there. That works fine for 95% of things, but every now and then you may want your players to start specifically where you put them. This is particularly useful for when you want them to if you want them to be on top of this barrier, for example, or if you want them to start inside of a vehicle, or I've done stuff where they're like up in a platform in the sky. So using having them start wherever this gets put down doesn't always work. You can try putting this on top of buildings and have mixed results. They may end up above or below it, or just somewhere in a where you weren't expecting. So most of the time this works just fine. But I like being able to make sure that my players start exactly where I've placed them in the world. So putting that script in there, and when you export it, will make sure that it skips the whole dying and respawning thing and just goes straight into going into where that character is. The other one, oh, I thought I had File Explorer open. Let me go open that again. The other one, the init.sqf one, if I open that. So this was originally designed to solve a bug where players would get stuck on a loading screen, where they would just stay there for forever and they wouldn't actually get through to joining the mission. Now, if I had to guess, Arma has probably patched this at some point, but because I've been using this for about 2 years and it's gone in every mission I've ever made now. Um, this may actually work and it may not. The thing is, you know, I don't see any reason to be taking it out because this never seems to mess up anything in any of my missions. And in case it's actually fixing a pretty annoying problem, I like to make sure it's in there. But I would say that these are both definitely optional, so these are not required for your mission to run. They're just some that I like to use. So if you want a copy of both, they should be there in the description. And once they're in there, all you have to do now is you have to go to export to multiplayer. And now that takes everything that was in the MP missions folder and puts it into the PBO for the server to read. Alright, so that about wraps it up. I think I've covered everything I wanted to tackle in this video. If you've got any questions or some stuff that you want some more clarification on, feel free to contact me about that. But I hope you found something useful in this video, and thanks for watching.